Greetings, Zimbabwe, and welcome to Zimbabwe Daily. My name is Yvonne Muchaka, and this is Behind the Mic with Honorable Daniel MOLOKELE in the studio. Welcome, Honorable.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me, Yvonne.
Awesome. So today we're bringing you this constituency watch so that we get to see what our honorable members of parliament are doing wherever they are, and if the people of the constituencies that they're coming from feel represented. So if you're from WHANGE Central, please join us in this conversation. We want to hear from you if your MP is saying what he is doing in your constituency. Awesome. Honorable, maybe you can start by introducing yourself fully. I know you're Honorable Daniel MOLOKELE, but who is Daniel MOLOKELE?
Okay, I think I was born in WHANGE, number 1 colliery.
You think?
I was born in number 1 colliery. I grew up there, spent my entire childhood there. Primary school at St. Ignatius Primary, number 1 colliery there. And I did my secondary at John Talak and Tabasidona, and my A-level I did it at Fletcher High School. And after Fletcher in 1995, I was admitted to the University of Zimbabwe Law School. So I did a law degree at the University of Zimbabwe from 1995 to 99.
Wow.
I think at that time I was known as Fortune Mugoni.
Right.
But I did a change of name in the year 2000 when I was practicing in Bulawayo.
Why?
No, as children, always knew that Mugoni was not our surname. It was an adopted surname. But we were told our real surname, and our surname is in Tswana. So it's MOLOKELE or MOLOKELE.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
now, you actually touch a very interesting subject that I think we're going to tackle a little bit later in this conversation. But maybe you can come in to tell us about your politics, your political activism. How did Daniel MOLOKELE end up? I hope I'm saying that correctly, but I hope we want to know how Daniel ended up being in the political sphere and taking over, as the MP of WHANGE. So if you can just outline your history there.
I think it's important to highlight the fact that I'm directly influenced by both my parents. My mom and my dad were community leaders in WHANGE, entire childhood of mine. In particular, they were all involved in the local party politics for PF ZAPU under the late Dr. Joshua Mkomo. And also my father was chairperson for the workers, for WHANGE colliery workers for many years, I think from 1979 to about 1994. And he was one of the founding leaders of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions and the former national leader of Associated Mine Workers Union of Zimbabwe. So I was influenced by my parents. And when I arrived at University of Zimbabwe, I was highly political conscious. Okay. And within my first year at university, I was elected Secretary General of the University of Zimbabwe Students' Union.
Wow. Okay. And then you obviously started your activism then, right, as a student leader. Yes. Now, how do you translate your student activism to national leadership?
Yeah, I think in my generation, I was one of the sort of most established student leaders. I'm a former Secretary General, but I'm also a former Vice President. I'm also a former President and also former Senasu Vice President to the late Len Mojongwe. So we were the student leaders who worked closely in terms of setting up the National Constitutional Assembly in 1997, but also in the process of setting up the MDC in 1999.
Right.
The only reason why I'm a bit different from my colleagues is that in 1999, when the process picked up to form the party, I decided not to go into full-time national politics. I felt I needed to, out of law school, sort of focus on my career first, and I ended up being in legal practice and then civil society.
Right.
But my colleagues, like the late Len Mojongwe, Job Sikala, Tafadzam Secure, I was with them at the UZ. And they are the ones who proceeded to go into national politics in the year 2000.
Right.
So I promised that I would join politics later. And in 2017, I officially returned into politics. And I was able to win primary elections in WHANGE. And in 2018, I was elected as the new member of parliament.
Right.
Up to 2023.
In the MDC.
Yes, I was elected under the leadership of Advocate Nelson Chamisa and under the MDC Alliance.
I see. All right. So we're coming to you live from our Zim Daily studios, and we're talking to Honorable Daniel MOLOKELE from WHANGE Central Constituency. We're just learning a little bit about him, where he's coming from and where he is. So we learned that his biggest influence was from his parents who were already in civic society and leading in the ZCTU. Now, we want to know, in your journey, I know you have mentioned that you decided to focus on your career before coming back into politics, but you obviously kept yourself in touch with colleagues. We've seen how you have been running with the Mainga Hama and Madzokere Solidarity Movement. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's true that I was mostly first initially in legal practice, then in civil society for many years, and worked closely with the political movement. But at the moment, one of the things that I'm doing is to support our political activists who we believe were unjustly and unfairly convicted and sentenced. Councillor Last Maengama and Tungamira Matsokere, they are each group in maximum prison. And so I'm one of the people who is coordinating a solidarity movement, supporting them in terms of their education, social welfare, and also awareness of their case, because they've got an appeal that is now more than a year old at the Supreme Court. And they were really convicted on circumstantial circumstances.
Right.
So we feel that they have a strong case, and hopefully one of their colleagues, incidentally, she's also called Yvonne. She was initially convicted and sentenced with them, was released about 2 years ago, and she's now serving as a member of parliament as we speak.
Right. She received an amnesty.
Some sort of amnesty.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. So these colleagues are in at Chikurubi Maximum Prison, having been sentenced about 23 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's a very long time that they were given, but we hope justice in the end will prevail.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we're talking to Honorable Daniel MOLOKELE. When we come back, we want to talk national duties as Member of Parliament. If you're joining us from WHANGE, please do contact us and tell us if your honorable is honorable in his constituency. Join us after this short break. Right, welcome back. This is Zimbabwe Daily. We're coming to you live on our platform. Do follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, share our page, subscribe on our YouTube channel. We are trying to bring you clean content that touches the lives of our country. We believe in development communication, and we believe in bringing conversations that matter onto your table. So today we are talking to Honorable MOLOKELE from WHANGE Central. We want to talk about your duties as MP. What are you supposed to be doing, and are you doing that?
Yeah, I think as a legislator, primarily you're a representative of the people in your constituents that voted for you, but you also play a role in terms of passing new laws or new legislation. You also play an oversight role in terms of the executive arm of the state, where government does the implementation role, but you do the follow-up. And if there are issues, the gaps that are outstanding, especially from a constituents point of view and also nationally, you are the one who is supposed to raise those issues and hold the executive to task and accountable.
Right.
So it's a multiple role for a member of parliament.
And are you really, representing your people, seeing that your party is in the parliament? Is your voice being heard there?
I think it's very difficult to say that we're like really representing, because there's been a lot of issues. There's been COVID-19, which has proved to be very disruptive. There's also been recalls that have also been disruptive. But I have played my part. I serve in 3 different committees.
Right.
Initially, I was chairman for the Committee on Higher and Tertiary Education until I was recalled from being chair due to my political position. But I also serve in the Women Affairs Committee, SMEs Committee, where I'm very active there. And also in the Health and Childcare Committee, I'm also very active there. So I think as a member of parliament, I've really done well. in terms of committee participation. I've also tried in terms of debate in parliament. That's one area where I also need to continue to improve. But I think one of the advantages of debate now that parliament is more virtual, it allows people like us who recently joined parliament more opportunity to participate. And I've seen an improvement, not just on myself, but on other new MPs like me. They are getting more space compared to the system that is there where people are meeting physically. There is always a group of MPs who have an upper hand in terms of speaking in parliament, but virtual parliament is allowing more voices, and it's good for parliament that other MPs like me are now being allowed to speak out, because it's hard in the fiscal system, because there are people who are just loud and they are near the speaker and so on. And they get the lion's share.
Right, right. I was going to ask on that, but I think you explained probably why it's actually proving, because there are some MPs that are in parliament and they just sleep, literally, because one, they're not contributing, or I don't know if it's because they actually don't understand what's going on in parliament. But I think, thank God for the virtual meetings then, for allowing us to do that. Now, I've seen that in your constituency, you're doing a number of activities. You've opened a legal practice. Can you tell us a little bit about those activities that you're doing in your constituency specifically?
I think during my campaign, one of the issues that was raised by the constituency people or members was that we need a law firm in Hwange that is permanent. We don't have a law firm that is permanent. Most of the law firms we've had are sort of sub-offices of other law firms in Victoria Falls or Bulawayo. So now, as an election promise, we are in the process of setting up a law firm, which I will lead because I'm a lawyer in my other life. It is not yet there physically, but administratively, we are in the process of registering it. So hopefully later this year, it will officially open. We've also started a lot of programs as the Office of the MP, empowering citizens, widows, youth, women. We are partnering with different NGOs. Some of them are based in Harare, but was working with them to come to Hwange and support our colleagues at the constituency level. We've also supported initiatives to set up local companies that are led by people of Hwange.
Right.
So there are many activities that we have come up with. And we've also tried to improve public feedback consultation process, which was a major concern in our campaign. So we have quarterly sort of meetings across all wards. They've been disrupted a bit by COVID, but we have public feedback meetings, which so far have worked well. And we've also tried to set up a fiscal office, which was another concern that was raised during the campaign. So our initial effort was to set it up at number 2 Colliery, but due to politics, we've ended up not being able to do so. But I've got good news. We have finally found an alternative office, and it's going to be at Ward 4 in Mpumalanga. So I think in the next month or two, we'll officially open the office of the MP. But we have staff. I have staff who work with me. I've got a personal assistant and spokesperson, Mr. Moyo, and an administrator, Ms. Muhammad, and the deputy administrator, Ms. Mdenda. We also have security staff, Ms. Tanjamba, Mr. Mpofu, and so on. I think I've got 5 to 6 full-time staff supporting the office of the MP, and then I've got 2-3 part-time staff on security.
And these staff that you talk about, are they paid by government or?
From the time I was elected MP, I took over their salaries. So most of the money that I get as an MP as a salary, which is very small, by the way, I just divert it straight to them.
Wow,
because
okay.
I believe that even though there's no official support from Parliament for office constituencies, it's still important for me as a people's representative to have a team that supports me.
Right.
You know that MPs spend most of their time in Harare. Like we're in Harare Monday to Thursdays. So it just leaves Friday to Sunday for constituency. So when I'm in Harare, the office of the MP continues, even though I'm not there physically, which also helps a lot. Hwange is about 800 kilometers from Harare.
Right. It's quite a journey. Right. So we're talking to Honorable Daniel from WHANGE Central. I think most of you could be asking what's wrong with Yvonne's spelling on the screen there. But we have Honorable MOLOKELE here to explain that to us as we move on to the next chapter of our national policies. So we talked about his personal life. We spoke about his political activism. We also talked about his duties as an MP. So when we come back from this short break, we are going to talk about national policies, the issue of the Patriots bill. We're talking also about the national sexual harassment policy. Join us after this short break. Awesome. So welcome back. This is Behind the Mic, where we are looking at constituencies around Zimbabwe. And our maiden show, we have Honorable. Well, this is our first show to actually profile our MPs. So we're excited to do this. So before we go into these other policies and acts of parliament, I think we want to touch on the national question. A lot of so-called minority groups have felt that they have been sidelined in terms of decision making in our country and stuff like that. So we want to start by, why is WHANGE, that we know spelling HWA, why do you insist on spelling it WHA?
Yes, I think Zimbabwe is a problem that a lot of decision-making process is done in Harare, and there is no proper consultation of local communities. Right. And the name of the town is a very big example we can give, because the local language in WHANGE is called Nambia. And Nambia, they do not have that kind of spelling that you see in the official name. And they actually, the traditional leaders, the community leaders, objected to the name. But because decisions are made in Harare, it was imposed on them. So when I was campaigning, that was one of the bone of contention about the name. So as part of the politics of protest, for the last 3 years, I've been using the correct spelling, which starts with a W instead of an H, because H is in Shona, and you can't have a Shona name right in the midst of Matabeleland for a town. And that town is not even a Ndebele town. It's actually a Nambia town. So the town is named after one of the chieftainships, the local Nambia community there.
Right. How does it feel, for you as somebody who was born and grew up in WHANGE and being exposed to the kind of politics that we have today, and 41 years later after independence, we're still fighting for identity in our nation. How does that feel?
Yeah, I think it's been a very long journey. Matabeleland North, where I come from, was affected by Kukuraundi in the 80s. We are totally excluded from the national development agenda for supporting the wrong political party. But we are still catching up. We are still feeling as much North that we are marginalized. More importantly, we've got a lot of minority languages and minority groups, like Tonga, like Nambia, like Dombe. They are there in Matabeleland North, and they feel excluded. There's a complete domination of English, Shona and Ndebele. So there's got to be an improvement. And lucky enough, we thank God that there's 2013 Constitution talks about devolution, also recognizing many languages.
16 official.
Yeah, that include some of them that are in Mat North.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity in terms of language recognition to push to affirm languages such as Dombe, Nambia, and Tonga, but more importantly also to respect the local identities for the so-called minorities, including naming of places, of towns and roads and villages, to make sure that they represent the local communities. But also more importantly, in terms of devolution, to see to it that more budget allocation is given to local communities. And Matabeleland North has got a lot of natural resources. WHANGE itself has got the animal sanctuaries, got coal reserves. But if you look at development, most of the development is not there in Matabeleland North, infrastructure and education, health. So we've been left behind. And hopefully devolution is going to help us catch up with the rest of the country.
When is devolution coming? We've been hearing the devolution talk for as long as we can remember. And yes, the 2013 constitution does make that provision, but it still remains
I think
like
it's
a
my
pipe
duty as a member of parliament to push for it. I think in the first 5-6 years, there was nothing much that was done. But in these last 2-3 years,
Right.
budget allocation has increased, and now there is a push towards the enactment of the Devolution Act. So setting up of provincial councils and so on. So I think there's going to be a shift. It's not easy because power, is sweet. So Harare is used to having all the power. So for them to share with the rest of the country is hard, but it's a process.
Right.
And I see a change in the last 2 to 3 years, especially from a budget allocation towards devolution. So what we need as MPs, as parliament, is to push for the enactment of the Devolution Act so that there is an administrative rollout. And hopefully there is going to be change on the ground.
Where has that money been going, the devolution funds, given that there's no administrative structure?
I think it was also raised in Parliament last week that why are we disbursing amounts when we do not have proper structures, especially around the provincial councils and so on. And there is an excuse to say that Constitutional Amendment 2 talks about removal maybe of MPs from provincial councils and so on. And once it's enacted, it will be easier to set up the structures based on the Devolution Act and so on. But I think this year there's going to be change.
Does it make sense, though, to remove the MPs from the provincial structures?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
If MPs were non-constituent MPs like those in South Africa, it would make sense. But we are directly involved at community level.
Right.
We are seen as representatives of development, and they were a key stakeholder as members of parliament. At the very least, we can be ex-officio members of the provincial councils. But to totally remove us, I don't think it's a good idea because we are the sort of focal point for development. In fact, parliament has got what we call the Constituency Development Fund, CDF, which is a very small amount of money, but is part of the efforts by parliamentarians to have local visibility in terms of development agenda. So I think it will be a costly mistake to exclude parliamentarians from the provincial councils.
I mean, it's like saying the father is the one that makes the money in the house, so the woman cannot decide what needs to be bought. I mean, it doesn't make sense. We are in the Women's Month anyway, so yeah, we might as well chuck it in there, right? I think you have responded very well to that, and I hope as citizens, we will become actively involved in pushing for devolution and making sure that local communities, local minority, so-called minority groups are also involved in the developmental agenda. After all, this is our Zimbabwe. We need to build it together. Now, we want to talk about the National Sexual Harassment Policy. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, I think it's coming mostly through my other committee on higher and tertiary education, innovation, science and technology development, where the ministry is working with the civil society, is working in partnership with the Public Service Commission to say that there is need to practically break down sexual harassment, because at this moment in time, from a policy point of view, there is only a small paragraph that mentions it. And there's been a lot of allegations over the years of sexual harassment, especially in institutions for higher learning.
Right.
So this is a step in the right direction for the ministry to come up with a policy on sexual harassment, for the Public Service Commission to come up with that. But I also want to mention that from a parliamentary point of view, especially through my other committee on women affairs, we are actually pushing for a sexual harassment bill that will become a new law, that one of its key purposes is to criminalize sexual harassment, because right now it is still basically a social concept, and a lot of people who are accused of sexual harassment are getting away with murder. So we want to enact a sexual harassment law that will break down in detail what sexual harassment is, and then at the same time it will come up with very strong penalties or restrictions for people who commit that kind of offense. And also, most importantly, it will bring in the criminal element so that sexual harassment is treated the same way we treat rape, and make sure that there are stiff convictions and stiff sentences for the offenders.
We saw a lot of conversation going around, especially in the last month, around the former Vice President, Mr. Mohade, and having probably this national sexual harassment as an act may actually help us to deal with, because there are a lot of men out there who are getting away with murder, essentially because there is no act of law that actually compels,
Sure.
people to take charge. And, let's talk about the Patriots Act. We have seen you speaking a little bit on that in Parliament. Can you tell us why you feel that it's not the time for us to be talking about the Patriots Act?
Okay, it is not yet an act, but it is a proposed bill.
A bill, yeah. Sorry, bill.
But I don't think it is gazetted yet. But a part of Parliament is pushing for it. To be more specific, I would say the ZANU-PF Parliamentary Caucus is pushing for it. I'm one of the MPs who has stood out in opposing the bill because, one, I think the timing is bad. It's a very punitive bill, by the way. It's targeting people who do not necessarily support the government position on human rights and democracy and so on. So these people are going out internationally and they're standing up. Maybe they're political, maybe they're civil society. But the bill is proposing that if you're a Zimbabwean and you are seen in an international stage speaking about human rights violations, democracy in Zimbabwe, the closing of democratic space, that act on its own is not a patriotic act. It's a criminal offense. And we think it's a deliberate effort to close down voices of dissent. Because if you are going to campaign against human rights violation, you are doing it because you love Zimbabwe. You've seen your fellow Zimbabweans. Let's say in Matilda, we know that there was cook round. So when you go out to Johannesburg or New York and say, my relatives are being killed, that is an unpatriotic act, and they will use it to arrest you and criminalize you. But I also think there's enough laws to deal with anyone who is not behaving in a patriotic manner. There are treason laws in this country.
Right.
There's laws around public order and security. So there are controversial media laws. There are also laws around cyber security. There's a cyber security bill. So I think it's actually said that the Parliament of Zimbabwe should debate criminalizing dissent, because the bill automatically assumes that there's no difference between ZANU-PF as a ruling party and ZANU-PF as a governing party, because these two concepts are not the same. You can actually be opposed to ZANU-PF and remain patriotic.
Right.
You can actually be a patriotic Zimbabwean by not supporting ZANU-PF. That on its own is being patriotic. So me as a Zimbabwean, I already know that I do not support ZANU-PF politics or policies.
Right.
So I think I have a right as a Zimbabwean to speak out. And if I do that under this new law, I will be deemed a criminal.
Wow. All right, we're coming to you live, so feel free to send in your questions, your contributions, your suggestions, or whatever. We are coming to you live, so we can actually get your comments and give you feedback in terms of what conversation we are having. And we are talking about the Patriots Bill. We've seen Honorable MOLOKELE standing up or speaking virtually in Parliament, talking about this and opposing it to a degree, because you're saying timing is wrong. And
also, something more specific, Yvonne, they're saying if you go out of the country and call for sanctions against the government, you are going to be deemed unpatriotic and criminalized. And I raised up with the ZANU-PF chief whip last week to say that in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, they from ZAPU and ZANU went international and called for sanctions against Ian Smith Rhodesian government. And that was a patriotic act.
Right.
40 years later, they are having selective memory. They're having selective memory because they are now the ruling party, they are the government. So when they commit human rights violations, they say if you go out internationally and speak against them, or even call for sanctions against them, you are being unpatriotic. Yet the same people had offices in Maputo, in Lusaka, and they were campaigning actively at the United Nations to say that Smith's government must be sanctioned. So far there
is need to have a proper definition of what patriotism really is.
And the kind of sanctions that they were calling for were not this kind of sanctions that we have today. These are called smart sanctions, targeted sanctions. Those sanctions they were calling for were wholesale sanctions against the Rhodesian government.
Right.
And that was part of the patriotic duty that they performed as nationalists for the liberation of this country. So I was saying now as Zimbabweans, if this government is ignoring human rights, is actually violating human rights, and the courts of this country seem to be politicized, the media, Herald and ZBC, they are very politicized. They will never report on anything bad against this government. They are parrots. So they will never say anything negative against them. The media space, the democratic space is closed. So
Right.
I think as a Zimbabwean, you have a right to speak out even internationally. And that will be criminalized if this bill is passed, from what they are saying.
Wow. Wow. I mean, it then, I always love to use the family unit because the family unit is the basis of anything else in our society. If a woman is being abused by a husband or a husband is being abused by a wife and they're told they can't go to the pastor for recourse, then it doesn't really make
Or to the
sense.
neighbors or to the relatives.
Exactly. You can't even go to the police because if the husband is arrested,
So
then
it advantages the person who is committing human rights violation.
Right.
That you are not allowed. While sovereignty, integrity, domestication, it advantages the one who is controlling the means of repression and suppression. And in this particular case, ZANU-PF is controlling the ZRP, is controlling ZBC, is controlling Herald, is controlling the army. So they are the ones that have the apparatus of the state, and they are using it against civil society and against opposition parties, and they are arresting activists who speak out, even against corruption.
Right.
If you speak out against corruption in this country, you'll be arrested.
Seeing we are in the Women's Month and having followed you on social media, I've seen you attending court cases of Cecilia Chimberi, Honorable Joanna Mamombe, and Netsai Maroba. When you look at their case, you're also a lawyer. What's your feeling about? I don't want us to comment on I think there is something about in the law areas where you can't really talk about cases, but yeah, just.
Yeah, of course, I cannot go into the detail of the case, but as a politician, I am able to say that I stand in solidarity with the Comrade Chimbiri or Comrade Mamomba or Comrade Maroa, Comrade Marco. They are just examples of Zimbabweans who are speaking out against their increasingly repressive regime. So it's called persecution by prosecution,
Right.
Political persecution by prosecution. So it's called lawfare, where you actually use the law to reduce competition in politics. And Ian Smith and the rotation system, they perfected that. They had laws like the Law and Order Maintenance Act that they used to suppress and repress alternative voices on the development agenda of the country, on the national agenda of this country. So we are seeing history repeating itself. The same government that took over from Ian Smith and promised freedom and democracy, 41 years later, they are repeating the same mistakes of Ian Smith, of arresting, detaining everyone who speaks out against them. In a normal country, a government should accept that they cannot be supported by everyone. So every Zimbabwean who does not like ZANU-PF policies should speak out. And they are not being unpatriotic, they are not being criminals. They are just being Zimbabweans. We cannot expect every Zimbabwean to support MDC Alliance. So if they think MDC Alliance is making mistakes, or Advocate Nelson Chamisa, our leader, is making mistakes, they have the right as Zimbabweans to point out his hypocrisy, his mistakes.
Right.
So they have the same right to do that to the leader of ZANU-PF. But why would they then use the police to deal with everyone who is against what they are doing? Because that is different from the state. You can actually support ZANU-PF and also oppose the policies of government of ZANU-PF.
Right.
There are two different concepts. But in Zimbabwe, there is a clear conflation. And if you go to the news bulletin for ZBC and Herald, you will see the problem there, where there is no difference between the political process and the government process. Advocate Nelson Chamisa was on TV last week, on Tuesday. He was not broadcast by what ZBC. He was not even, it was not even a big story on Herald. 2 days later, Honorable Simon Kamo, ZANU-PF spokesperson, is on the same channel talking and responding directly to the speech that was not broadcast.
Right.
And that was a good example of what we're talking about, where ZBC can now be officially be renamed and be called ZANU-PF Broadcasting Corporation, because it is clear that it is not a national broadcaster. It is not a public broadcaster. It is only pushing a political agenda of a specific party. And as a legislator under MDC Alliance, I'm not saying it because my party is not being given treatment, preferential treatment. I'm talking as a Zimbabwean to say that we want ZBC, we want Herald that are funded by taxpayers to give equal access to minorities, to political parties without fear or favor, which is not happening right now. They only give access to a specific kind of people, to a specific kind of political party, and they are not serving their duty. And there are court judgments against them. and they continue to violate them. I think Honorable Luke Tamborinyoka once got a judgment against ZBC.
Right.
But today they've completely ignored they're in contempt of the court order against them. So that's the problem we have in Zimbabwe today. There is no separation between ZANU-PF as a ruling party and ZANU-PF as the government. You can't be the ref and also be the player in the same game. You have to separate the two. And that's the problem we have in Zimbabwe.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So that was just dealing with the national policies, and I can tell that you're so passionate about a system that's just not working for our country. But all the same, thank you so much for joining us in studio as we did our maiden show on Constituency Watch. We were looking at Hwange Central. Maybe parting shots to people who follow Daniel Molokele, people who voted Daniel Molokele, people, what should they be looking forward to? What is it that is on the cards for Hwange Central?
I think for me, I want to serve my country. I want to, when I die, I want to say that this is how I lived my life. I wanted to serve my country, sacrifice, selflessness. And so for the people of Hwange and for the people of Zimbabwe, help me to fulfill what I want to do, to serve my people, because I love my people with all my heart. So when you see me making mistakes, advise me. When you see me failing to be respectful, advise me. When you see me doing well, encourage me.
Right.
Because I know people, it's easy for them to give complaints than compliments. But at the end of the day, it's about this Zimbabwe. I'm driven to say this Zimbabwe should not just be one of those countries. It should be a great Zimbabwe. It should be a country that we are proud to be associated with.
Right.
And with the natural resources that we have, with the human capital, the human resources that we have the potential to be one of the most admired countries, a great country. So all we need is to unite, especially politically. We are failing politically. If we could find each other politically. And we know that in 1980, after Lancaster House, we tried to work together to move the country. In 1988, after the UNITA Accord, we tried to work together to move the country. In 2009, after the Global Political Agreement, the late Dr. Morgan Tsvangirai and the late Robert Mugabe, they tried to unite the country. And we could see from that all-inclusive government that if the main political parties work together, we focus on development as a country. People on the ground can benefit. So what we need is political unity. And we need national dialogue. We need dialogue that is not just for political parties, but for all concerned citizens of Zimbabwe, youth, women, trade unions, farmers, villagers, everyone who is a stakeholder, business, everyone who is a stakeholder in this country. We need to come together. And let's not leave this country in the hands, the future of this country in the hands of political parties. That's why personally I don't support Pollard, because Pollard is very restrictive and narrow. Pollard defeats the whole purpose of uniting a country. It separates other people from others. So we need a much more broader platform where politicians are not given special treatment. If you are a pastor, archbishop of a church, you are a key national stakeholder. If you are a CEO of a major company in Zimbabwe, you are a key national stakeholder. So we need all these captains of industry, faith-based leaders, farmers, wherever you are, who are making a contribution to come to the national space. And we dialogue as a country and say, what kind of Zimbabwe do you want? How do you move from where we are to be the great Zimbabwe that we want? And that does not need MDC Alliance. That does not need ZANU-PF. It needs all of us working together. And our people on the ground will benefit. Because right now, Zimbabwe is getting poorer by each year. When it can be get richer.
Right.
So the politics is toxic and it's not helping the people of Zimbabwe. And we need a change in the approach we do politics. I think before I'm MDC Alliance, I'm Zimbabwean first.
Right.
So that's how everyone should think, beyond the political party lens, and say, how do we work together beyond the political divide and build a new country, a country that will be admired by everyone, a great Zimbabwe. That's how I feel. If I were to die today, that would be something on my conscience, that when I died, it was still called Zimbabwe.
Right.
I want to die when it's called great Zimbabwe.
Right.
We've got millions of us in the diaspora right now. That is
Right.
another source of shame for me and embarrassment. A lot of Zimbabweans are stranded internationally. Millions of them.
Even our animals.
So if we work together, at least this thing will come to an end. Because
Right.
yes, it's a blessing in disguise to have a diaspora. It can be harnessed for our development. But remember that there is a lot of issues that people in the diaspora face. There is xenophobia. Those who are in South Africa will tell you. So we would love that the situation changes. This is the country that God gave us. This is a beautiful country.
Right.
This is a rich country with
Right.
a lot of minerals, diamonds, gold, coal, you have them. So we're just mismanaging this country. Otherwise, we should all be rich. We should be a first world country.
You know. Thank you so much, Honorable Daniel, for coming through and having this conversation with us. I'm richer as I sit here, and I hope you also are as you are joining us. Thank you so much to all of you who managed to join us online. I can see your comments. I'm trying to read them. I'm a little bit far from my machine. But thank you so much, Dube Lord Toots, chilling, making sense. Keep it up. Thank you so much for coming through and sending in your comment. Thanks to you. Maureen Kademaunga, thank you, selfless servant of the people of Whange. Well articulated. Thank you so much, Maureen, for coming through. Thank you, Tsukiri Chuma. I hope I said your name correctly. That's it, Honorable. Yes, we need a better Whange and a great Zimbabwe. Thank you so much, Zimbabwe, for coming through on Zimbabwe Daily. We're coming to you live from our studios. Thank you so much for your questions, for your contributions. Thank you, Benson Dangirwa. Thank you, Honorable. You are being thanked. Thank you so much for coming through. This was our inaugural show where we're looking at constituencies, what our MPs are doing. Hopefully, when we have more people coming through, especially from our beloved ZANU PF, they'll also be able to tell us more about this patriotic act and how they're supporting it in Parliament. Thank you, Justin Makarudze. You say we need a great Zimbabwe, Honorable, for sure. Indeed, we need a great Zimbabwe. And thank you, Kurana Penny. Siyawonga, Honorable. Thank you so much. Thank you, Penny, for your message. Thanks to all of you. Indeed, Zimbabwe should not be left in the hands of politicians. I always argue that our politics is so toxic and so bad that we are not moving forward. Instead, so we need to build a better political culture in order for us to get to a better space. Thank you so much for joining me on Zimbabwe Daily and the team that I have in the studio. Thank you so much to Honorable MOLOKELE. Thanks to all of you for joining us. You make us do better. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of day.